Welcome back to Power Hour. This is Ari Wasserman filling in for Nicole Auerbach on this holiday week because she is famous and has a lot going on. Please bear with me. Alongside me, as always on the show, is Chris Fanini. We'll be reacting to the latest college football playoff rankings here in a moment. But for you podcast listeners, after we're done breaking down the rankings, Chris and Nicole caught up with Big Ten Network's Jake Butt and Joshua Perry, a former Michigan and Ohio State player, to preview the game, which they both have a lot of experience in. So be sure to stick around after the rankings discussion to get the full Power Hour. Also, be sure to follow the podcast on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast. Drop us a 5-star review. Leave a question with your review, and we'll be sure to try to answer that on the show. And subscribe to the Until Saturday YouTube channel. If you're here watching with us live, we certainly appreciate it. If you're listening to us in audio form, you can find us on YouTube, where we go live on Tuesday nights after the playoff reveal, Thursdays for the pick show, Saturdays for the reaction, and then Sunday for Sunday Sound Off. The links can be found in the show's description. And if you want to participate in Sunday Sound Off, where we use your voicemails to help us get through the show, we'd love to hear from you. It's one of my favorite things to do every week. Questions, comments, concerns, insults, conspiracy theories, anything that you have to say, we're interested in hearing. Please call 316-462-9852. Again, that is 316-462-9852. You can also text that number, but we certainly would rather use the voicemails. And lastly, you can subscribe to The Athletic for $1 a month for our Black Friday deal, $1 a month for 12 months. Visit theathletic.com/Saturday, and the deal is good through November 27th. $1 a month for the best sports journalism on the face of the earth, I think, is a really good deal here. So why don't we get right into it here? The college football playoff rankings have been revealed following week 12. And I don't know if you know this, Chris, but this is the furthest into the college football season during the college football playoff era, dating back to 2014, where there's still 5 unbeaten teams. And somehow we've figured out a way to make where unbeaten teams are ranked controversial. So we're going to get into that. So do you want to run down the top 10 here and tell me, what sticks out to you as we get into the number one debate, which is Washington, Florida State right now?
Yeah. For people who don't, who didn't see it or whatever, I got to pull it up here. I don't have the top 10 in front of me, actually.
I can do it. Number 1, Georgia.
You got it.
Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Michigan. Number 4, Washington, and number 5, Florida State. So they switched. Washington moved up, and all 5 of those teams are unbeaten. Number 6 is Oregon, coming in as the top-ranked one-loss team, followed by number 7, Texas, number 8, Alabama, number 9, Mizzou, hopping one-loss Louisville, who comes in at number 10. So whether or not Louisville is still alive in the college football playoff race, I think is up for some debate if they are to win out and some things work their way, but being hopped by a 2-loss team is not necessarily a good look if that's something that you're hoping for in Louisville. But that doesn't take away from the great season they've had under first-year head coach Jeff Brom. What an awesome story that is, and certainly going to be fun to track. So the biggest story of the week, Chris, is Washington moving in to the number 4 slot, hopping Florida State. Obviously, Florida State won their game, but they lost star quarterback Jordan Travis for the year, who suffered a gruesome lower leg injury. And announced on Twitter, obviously, that he's done for the year and his Florida State career is over. Why did that happen? Why don't we go to CFP Committee Chair Boo Corrigan to explain it, and then we'll break it down.
What carried the day for Washington moving up a spot, the number 4 ahead of Florida State?
Yeah, it really was about Washington and what Washington did this past weekend, and going up to Reser Stadium, tough place to play. Their defense has come around, has played well the last 6 quarters, given up a total of 20 points. Again, know that it was a rainy day, but in total, again, and that's what we're looking at, and y'all were talking different data points, but, watching games does matter. And as we looked at Washington over the course of the season, looked at Florida State this past week in week 12, we decided to put Washington ahead. Okay, so what impact did the injury to Jordan Travis have on the evaluation of Florida State? Didn't have any impact. As we're watching the game, Florida State starts off down 13. Rodemaker comes in to the game. They score 58 consecutive points. They got a lot of dudes on the field, Reese. They got a lot of guys that can play. And, as we're looking at it, that's where we are this week. And again, anything beyond that is going to be projecting.
I thought there were a few interesting nuggets there, Chris, but I think that you have a very strong take on Washington and where they should be ranked, and it's not necessarily whether they should be 5 or 4, but maybe a little higher.
Yeah, Washington should be number 2 here to me, and I don't think it's particularly close when you look at what they've done. They've beaten Oregon, Oregon State, USC, Arizona, Utah. 3 of those 5 games come on the road. They have a better group of wins than anybody else in the country. You can make the case the win over Oregon is the best win in the country. Yeah, they struggled with Arizona State and Stanford, and they haven't won a game by more than 10 points since, I think, the middle of September. But when you look at the resume at this point, like their wins, their collection of wins are so much better than Ohio State and especially Michigan have right now. Again, it ultimately doesn't matter because it'll work itself out. If Washington is undefeated, they'll be in. It's fine. I'm just really surprised that Washington only went up to 4 when you consider they just went on the road, beat Oregon State, a team a committee still has ranked, and here they are. You, I know, have had questions about Washington for a while.
Me? I'm the only one?
Well, you wrote about it. You talked about it on here before, so figured
I think that they were super impressive this past week. I think that they played in the rain and they basically dominated the game. You want to know what my favorite thing about Washington was? On the final drive on 3rd down and short, when they were trying to play keep away from Oregon State and not allowing their opponent to get the last possession, instead of running the ball and playing cowardly, Kalen DeBoer put the ball in Michael Penix Jr.'s hands, and he threw a dart in one-on-one coverage. I believe it's a back shoulder throw to Rome Odunze, who caught the pass, and they got up and, did that bow and arrow celebration. It was like, that is the epitome of a coach trusting his players and their best players stepping up in key moments like it's not for the game and just executing a very tough play like it was easy. I think that Washington's body of work is impressive. I think that the fact that they were able to win all those games in the Pac-12, many of which that you just mentioned came on the road, is super impressive. Obviously, we know how challenging navigating the Pac-12 schedule was going to be. And I know that, like, sometimes too, even a win like Utah that might not necessarily look great without the ranking that they have is still a tough place to win. And they did that. So I am 100% on board with Washington being ranked where they're ranked. Now, the question that I have is, and you did the mock playoff committee, and I've done the mock playoff committee. You know damn well in that room, they're not just saying which teams have the best resume. They're watching the games, they're evaluating it, they're feeling it out. So I'm going to ask you back, if you were to put them number 2, you do our top 133 rankings every week. How much of your feeling of Washington is predicated on the pure data, and how much of it is predicated on what you feel when you watch them play?
It's both. They're number 1 in ESPN's strength of record. They have the best strength of schedule among the 5 undefeated Power 5 teams, according to ESPN as well. So like the numbers are there in terms of what they've done and who they've played. And when you watch it, you look at this offense, those receivers, Michael Penix Jr., and like you said, when the game is on the line, you trust that they're going to have the guys to make the plays. That's what they did against Oregon. They got the stop on 3rd down, 4th down. Penix drives them down and wins the game. Like it's a team that is not flawless, obviously, but it's a team that continues to show up in the big moments. It has the star players. It has one of the Heisman leaders. I just think this is a team that, coming into the season, I think you and I talked about Washington. I had them in the playoff to start the year, and just what they've done is more impressive than anybody. I mean, I think Georgia's clearly a better team, and the debate is Ohio State and Michigan. Would you take them over Washington? They'd probably be favored, but I don't know, as someone who you yourself is skeptical of Michigan a bit, and especially their passing offense, I mean, if you lined up Washington against Ohio State or Michigan, do you think Washington would certainly lose, or 50-50, or how would you compare them if they lined up with each other?
See, I was about to jump down your throat, then you saved yourself. I'm over here chomping at the bit, ready to debate you. Let me tell you, I really miss being on the post college football playoff show, because this really, fires me up. But the thing that I think is interesting is there's no question. I mean, I guess it's not much of a debate that Washington probably has the best win in college football right now, right? Washington has a better complete resume than anybody in the country when you add up all the wins they have, right? So if you're going to do this from a resume standpoint, then go all the way with it. Why not put them ahead of Georgia? If that's the way you're looking at it, go all the way with it. But the reason why you're okay with them being number 2 behind Georgia is because you know in your gut, or you say you know in your gut, that Georgia's a better football team than them, right? So let's just take what I just said and hold that. Now you have to apply that to everybody, because if that's the way you view it, you can't pick and choose when to apply that criteria.
This is why I'm asking you.
Washington is better than Ohio State and Michigan? No, I don't. Now they have a really good quarterback, and I think they've got one of the best receivers in college football, but I don't think that team would beat those 2 teams. So
you watch what JJ McCarthy's done the last 2 weeks, throwing for less than 100 yards and not doing much, and you think for sure, I'm not saying Michigan wouldn't be favored, but you're saying you don't think Michigan would be close.
It'd probably be a pretty good game. Yeah, but I think Michigan would win, so I would put Michigan ahead. Like that
I'm not so sure about that anymore. I was at other points in the season, but as it's gone on, I've actually felt more comfortable about Washington.
Well, the beauty of this is that you don't have to worry about it. Both of these teams are unbeaten and control their destiny. So like, that's what makes me shaky, is like, if we ever got to the last week of the season and the games are over and we had to have this debate between 2 teams that are both deserving, and one would be inevitably left out, then I would feel worse about it. But when we're talking about it in the context of 2 teams who are clearly in, if they don't lose, then I'm fine picking and choosing who I think is going to win or lose. But I think you're right with Washington's resume. They certainly have done a really good job, but at the same time too, it's like, do we not think that, Ohio State could beat Arizona? Do we not think that Ohio State would beat Utah? Do we not think that Michigan would beat some of these teams? So to me, it's like, if you think that they are one of the best combination of talents between the wide receiver and quarterback position, and they've got the best win in the sport, then why would you rank them in behind Georgia right now when Georgia's playing Alabama next weekend?
Yeah,
and I just think be able to hop them back. So like, the way that I don't understand the way the committee works is that it's, and the thing that drives me crazy, and I understand why, there's more than one person in the room doing this, but they inconsistently rank teams, and it's hard for them to be transparent about why. It's like one team will be bolstered by eye test and another team will be bolstered by resume, and then later in the rankings, they'll flip-flop their thought process on another 2 set of teams, and it doesn't make sense. And I think that's why people lose their minds. But like, for me, if I were on the committee, I would rank teams based on what I know from their resumes. Who's got the best resume right now? We're going to put Washington ahead, knowing damn well down the line that we're going to get more context for the teams that we ranked ahead. And then at the end of the road, I would quantify eye tests and all those things when it's time to make that decision and the dust settles and we have all the data that we need and a clear path to the Final Four.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think about Washington's offense and how it's nothing like anything Ohio State or Michigan have played this year. And when I think about Michigan, in these rare instances where these Big Ten teams step outside the Big Ten and what they do, it's been mixed results. Ohio State has the talent, it typically comes through. Michigan last year goes and loses to TCU. Like, I'm not, if you put Washington and Michigan together, to me, it's a coin flip. I think I could see Washington winning. I could see Michigan winning. I think that can go either way. So
the
ultimately,
thing I will say is, I like getting fired up about college football playoff debates, but when teams are undefeated and whether they win or lose will decide whether they're in or out, like, it's hard for me to get amped up about it because Washington is 1 win away, 2 wins away. They got to beat Wazoo and they've got to beat Oregon. And if they're able to beat Oregon again, then I'm perfectly fine ranking them number 2 in the final set of rankings if it comes to that, and end up it's like the seeding kind of flip-flops at the end anyway. So like, are people in, like, even last week when people in Seattle were fired up, it's like, do you really care that they're 5 right now? Like, why do you care? It doesn't matter. But I understand too that it's an ego thing and you want to be in the top 4 and all that stuff. But I think this is a nice transition to Florida State, because I think these 2 teams are kind of one and the same a little bit because they're being ranked against each other a little. What is your take on Florida State's quarterback situation? Do you think that losing their quarterback should have an impact on whether they go, or do you think automatically Florida State is in if they finish as an undefeated ACC champ?
I think they're in. I don't think they would let them out, especially because
I'm asking you what you would do.
I would have. Well, we got to see what the games are. Like Cardell Jones went in and won 59-0 against Wisconsin. Like, that was, and remember, Ohio State like jumped TCU and Baylor, I think, at the end of the year. So like, that was a statement. It depends if Florida State barely holds on and beats Florida, barely holds on and beats Louisville, or then it's
Or loses one of them. Obviously, it doesn't matter, but yeah.
Well, if they lose, then it's a different
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, but if they're undefeated with 2 really shaky wins and Rodemaker doesn't look good, then maybe we have a debate. But it depends what happens elsewhere too. I'm not penalizing them now for the quarterback thing. I don't think that's why Florida State dropped to 5 now. I think it's only because Washington won at Oregon State. I don't think in the end they would have an undefeated Florida State miss out ultimately, and I wouldn't either. Although it depends who they're up against, I guess. We don't know. I got questions about other.
I think that if they're undefeated, they should take up a spot. And if you think it's a wasted spot, then it's a wasted spot. But they earned it. Yeah. And Mr. Regular Season is Sacred can't dismiss how hard it is to go undefeated from wire to wire in the Power 5 and then not reward that team with a chance to play for it, even if I feel like they were going to get their doors blown off. The fact of the matter is, and I think this might be a controversial thing to say to Florida State fans, but if FSU was the 4 seed going into the playoff playing Georgia, I think they get their doors blown off with Jordan Travis. I don't even think much changes. Like, really, I mean, they have probably a better chance, obviously, with Jordan Travis on the field, but like it or not, they're probably going to be 14 to 17 point underdogs in the game anyway. I don't know, at least 2 scores. So, that
I don't think it'd be 14 if Travis was playing.
No,
if it's Rodemaker,
maybe it'd be 10.
Yeah.
7.5.
Well,
I don't know. Maybe I overdid it a little bit. 17's a lot of points, but I think that Georgia would win that game very easily.
Right.
So that to me, it doesn't really change much. If a team is undefeated, it's undefeated. So I don't know if we want to talk about disaster scenarios yet. Why don't we go into the Ohio State-Michigan game here? Obviously, both of these teams need to win to get in, right? There's no thought process that the loser of this game is getting in like they did last year.
Ohio State, maybe. I still think it's a maybe. Michigan, no. If Michigan loses, they are out. I think Texas, Oregon. Well, I guess Oregon could lose it, but if Oregon, I think a 1-loss Washington, if they lose the Pac-12 game, would stay ahead of Michigan, for example, or Oregon would jump them. It's hard to see a situation where Michigan loses and gets in. Ohio State, maybe, but also very, very unlikely, because if you see what happens elsewhere, if Texas, Oregon, Alabama, there's a lot of 1-loss teams that, if they do get in, are going to be ahead of Michigan, because
there's more options this year than there were last year.
A lot more. That TCU losing in the championship game and getting in is probably not going to happen this year. If Washington loses in the Pac-12 championship game, I don't think they're getting in. If Georgia loses in the SEC championship game, could be close. It could be close. Florida State loses, they're out. It's not going to be like last year. The top 8 is way more packed than it was last year.
But this is a really big game for Ohio State and Michigan, not because of just the obvious stuff, but from a seeding standpoint. I know you get all fired up about seeding. Like, that's going to be what really drives the bus
next year.
Yeah, it's important. It's more important than you think it is. And Georgia or Alabama will either, I think, will probably be one. I don't know. If Alabama wins the SEC, they might not be one. Yeah. But if we assume that Georgia beats Alabama, then the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game, with that win under their belt going into the Big Ten championship and then potentially beating Iowa out there, makes them the 2 seed, thus helps them avoid any first-round semifinal matchup with Georgia, which I think is significant for both teams.
You made the case last year when the seedings came out that Georgia
got screwed,
the short end of the stick by playing Ohio State instead of Michigan, which got TCU. Michigan.
You should go read the comments on that story, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to laugh.
It's a fair point.
Knowing that we don't know.
Whoever you are, if Georgia or Alabama is in the field, which presumably one will be, you don't want to play them. So yes, it'd be better to get up to number 2, unless Alabama's number 3. That's where I think the committee may have to kind of take that into account a little bit.
Yeah, but even so, if Alabama wins, Alabama's not going to be 4 either. So you're not playing an SEC team in the first round, no matter what. Like, there's no way that the 1-loss SEC champion. Let's go to that. Let's go right to that, because I think that's the most. You did not read my column today because you think I'm a bad writer, but I want to express my growth as a human being. For those of you who are unaware, Chris and I both live in Dallas. We hang out, and I think quite a bit for 2 adults with responsibilities. but we covered the TCU game and we argued about the playoff all the way there from Dallas and Fort Worth and then all the way home, which is probably a good hour and 15-minute debate with some 4-letter words and some inappropriate language mixed in there. But my take on the 4-team field has been fervently against it. Like I do not like the expansion. Sorry,
Right.
fervently against the expansion of the 4-team
I've
field.
heard.
I prefer the 4-team field. That said, I went and looked it up. There have only been 9 undefeated or 1-loss teams in week 12 2 other times during the playoff era. So we are getting into certain uncharted territory with 5 of those teams this year of the 9, including Louisville, being undefeated. And there is 1 or 2 disaster scenarios that could happen this year that would force me to change my stance on the 12-team field. I'll never think that the 12 teams is right. I think it should be 8 at the very least, or 6 at the very least, but not more than 10. But if Washington wins out, that's a spot. Then there's another spot for Ohio State or Michigan. That's 2. I don't know why that does that thumbs up. Florida State wins their next 2 games. They're probably in, right? So you have 3 unbeaten Power 5 teams. Now, if it comes down to the final spot and Alabama beats Georgia, which removes 2 of the 5 unbeatens, the loser of the Ohio State game and Georgia, then there is a debate for the final spot, which would be between 1-loss Texas with a win on the road at Alabama and Alabama with a win recently over Georgia in the city of Atlanta to win the SEC. And if that happens,
and
one
Georgia,
of those 2,
I mean, and Georgia,
yeah, well, Georgia's probably going to be out in that scenario,
probably,
and that's it. But that's fine. But in that scenario, no matter who you think should go, somebody who deserved it and earned it won't go, and that has never happened in the 14 field. So if we actually get chaos this year, and I think that it's not crazy upsets, it's not Iowa beating Ohio State or Michigan, it's not any of these 17 or 21 point dogs in the conference championship games that we're counting on. Like we're talking about real life results against good teams playing good teams, and it's 2 or 3 results that we need.
Yeah,
and then we're in that position. That would stink. So I'm telling you, as a man who grows through new information. Yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I'm a little bit nervous about the chaos.
Look. There is a scenario here where we get undefeated Michigan, Ohio State winner, Georgia, Florida State, Washington, and it's a clear 4 undefeated top 4. And right there, boom, you're like, we shouldn't go to the playoff. This is the perfect 12-team, perfect 4-team field, something we've never had before. It's an unprecedented type of situation. It's a clean decision by the committee, but it also it brings back that debate of why do we need to go to more. But there's also, like you said, a couple changes here or there. If Alabama beats Georgia, if Oregon beats Washington, there's a couple of changes that could really shake this whole thing up. And if those happen in the next 2 weeks, obviously we'll talk about them. We don't need to go through all the scenarios now. But yeah, this is unlike any year we've ever had in the playoff. And I don't think this one year should be a determination on whether or not expanding is right or wrong, because we've never had a year like this. Most years, it's easy to get to 4. Some years, there's not even 4. The first year of the playoff, you could have said it should have been 6, Baylor, TCU. So it's going to make these last 2 weeks fascinating. And the conference championship games are going to be massive.
I feel like this is the perfect illustration for why it should stay 4, unless we get to the end of the road and there are unanswered questions that leave somebody being left out. But I love the idea that the Ohio State-Michigan is likely a elimination game. I love that the Alabama-Georgia game is likely an elimination game. I like that every game that Florida State is playing for the rest of the year, whether that be Florida this weekend and whatever, Florida and whoever they play, or Louisville in the ACC, that's a elimination game. So when you talk about the expanded field to 12, just remember the playoff is right now in the sport. It's happening right now. We have a 12-team field. The games are happening starting this week. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's get to the next few segments here. Let's do a New Year's 6 update, Chris. I'll hand that over to you.
I don't know what the New Year's Six situation. Missouri's in a really good spot, obviously, to get in. Louisville depends on where things go. Penn State, they play Michigan State. A lot of these teams are in a good spot to kind of get into that New Year's Six bowl. It's weird because we think about like the group of 5 spot, we think about the playoff spot. The in-betweens are kind of, as long as you don't lose a game you shouldn't lose. If you're Penn State, Missouri, a couple of these other teams, you'll be fine. You're not going to make the playoff, but you'll make a Fiesta Bowl or something like that and have a lot of fun with it. The group of 5 race got really interesting now because Tulane is there at, I think, 23 and Liberty is at 25. That means no SMU, no Toledo, no James Madison, obviously, who is not eligible. And if Tulane has UTSA this week, huge game, winner goes to the American Championship game, likely against
3 7-0 teams in the American. So still, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's Liberty now has a real shot. I wasn't sure if they would, if they win their last game, then they play now 9-win New Mexico State in the conference championship game. If Tulane loses to UTSA or wins and loses to SMU, it's possible undefeated Liberty. You could have undefeated Liberty versus maybe a 2-loss SMU for that spot, or a 3-loss UTSA, because I don't see Toledo jumping Liberty at this point. So it's time to think about Liberty potentially getting into that New Year's Six spot. That is now on the table.
And the Tulane game at UTSA could be a tricky little matchup there.
Very much.
I'm not necessarily sure that Tulane's going to win that game.
No, I think I actually picked UTSA. Tulane, UTSA with Frank Harris, completely different team. Obviously, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire group of 5. That's going to be a really tough game. But if you have like a 3-loss UTSA and a 2-loss SMU in the championship game and 3-loss UTSA wins, like American's probably not getting the bid at that point. It's probably going to Liberty, or if Liberty loses, maybe a Toledo or something like that. So a lot to watch in the group of 5 spot. That's going to be a lot of fun. All the conferences have some really good stuff. Last couple things I want to bring up here. 2 ranking decisions that made 0 sense to me.
This is the segment that Chris always does at the end where he complains about the bottom half of the rankings, and it's my favorite thing.
Because it plays into what's going on at the top of the rankings. Tennessee being 21 is insane to me. They have beaten nobody. Their best wins are Texas A&M, which fired its coach, Kentucky, which is 6-5, and UTSA, which did not have Frank Harris. But Tennessee being ranked gives Alabama, Georgia, and Missouri all the top 25 win. That's pretty convenient. Tennessee has also been blown out in their last 2 games by Georgia and Missouri. Do you think Tennessee should be there? Do you think Tennessee's just there to help boost the teams at the top?
So the way that they rank the teams in the committee room, I don't think that it works in a way where they can deliberately do that. Like, I don't think that people in the room are making a conscious decision to be like, hey, why don't we just slide Tennessee up there and do that so that we can help out Alabama?
Yeah, Tennessee was 25th.
Tennessee
was 25th in the AP poll, which I still think is weird. But it's not, you're right. It's not just like out of nowhere.
But I do think that the bottom half of these rankings gives teams at the top that are going to be, it's just like, if we get into that Alabama-Texas debate and Tennessee ranks 19 at the end of the year, then they're going to use that Tennessee win for Alabama in that discussion. That might even make it to the point where Alabama is the clear choice and they don't have to get to the protocol that involves considering the head-to-head. So from that standpoint, it's certainly significant, and I do think that they're overranked.
Yes. And the other
what's the one most impressive thing they've done all year? I don't even know.
It's Texas A&M. No, the most impressive thing they've done is have a lead against Alabama and then lose it and blow it. That was the most impressive thing they've done. So that's a weird, very weird ranking. Clemson's in there too, kind of shaky, but you can at least make a case. Hey, they beat Notre Dame, they beat North Carolina, whatever. I don't understand Tennessee in there. The other one is Kansas State is 1 spot ahead of Oklahoma State. This could have some New Year's Six implications. K-State 1 spot over Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State beat Kansas State on a Friday night, and I feel like nobody watched that game because
I watched it.
There have been multiple instances in various rankings, human poll rankings, where Kansas State's been 1 spot ahead of Oklahoma State. And in
fairness, if you watched the game, it was like Kansas State forgot how to play football for an afternoon.
Yeah, but
I don't know what happened that day. That was like a weird game. Unsolved mysteries episode. Yeah,
if you've got 2 teams that are right next to each other and they played each other, how is the team that won the game not the higher team? I couldn't go on the teleconference, and I'm sure I wouldn't get a clear answer, but just like as someone who ranks 133 teams every Sunday, I'm constantly looking, hey, did these two teams within like 2 or 3 spots play each other? Oh yeah, I got to flip them because they beat that team. Like to have that in a 25 team ranking, to have Kansas State above Oklahoma State was just bizarre to me. It ultimately probably doesn't matter. I just wanted to talk about it.
I've seen firsthand the amount of work that you put into the 133, and I want to do a quick public service announcement. Chris works his ass off putting those together, and the man is afraid to read the comments because it's so abusive. And like, I don't think that people realize how bleeping hard it is to do that. Like, I do not envy that. And if there was one media member who I believe is qualified to be on the committee, there's nobody more qualified than you, Chris, because you're watching all the Group of 5 games. You're in the nitty gritty and the stats. Like, you are a very smart and dedicated person, and I really appreciate you allowing me to crash the Power Hour party. I'll let everybody who is listening to this get back to the star of the show, which is Chris and Nicole. And if you are interested in hearing what I have to say at any other point, check out the other episodes in the Until Saturday feed. Thank you guys so much for bearing with us during this quick recap of the latest college football playoff rankings. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to The Athletic. Again, it's $1 a month during the Black Friday sale. That is theathletic.com/Saturday. That is good till November 27th. Enjoy your Thanksgivings, your families. Have a nice, relaxing day. Enjoy the NFL, and most importantly, enjoy rivalry weekend, because it's going to be one like no other. Chris, thanks so much for your time. I'm Ari Wasserman. Here is Power Hour.